I'm Paul Van Squike, your Taekwondo guide, and this is Topic Tuesday on a Wednesday. Welcome, my Taekwondo friends. If you're wondering why this one is late, I had a car that was spraying coolant everywhere. It was dramatic. Never had anything like that one before, and it had to be dealt with. So Topic Tuesday is on Wednesday this week. But hey, as they say, better late than never. If it's your first time, the concept is simple. Simply leave me a comment about Taekwondo and I'll talk about it. If you want to participate, get down in the comments, leave one, and it will be part of next week's show. All right, from Lyndon King 2476. I recently went to a class where they were teaching Han Shin Sul, or self-defense scenarios, and from personal experience, I found many of them ineffective or even dangerous to be learning. By the way, I have a sore on my tongue, so if I lisp, it's because of the sore on my tongue. Now, there's also a sore over here. It's kind of ridiculous. So, forgive me. In one scenario, for instance, I am on my back on the ground and my attacker is trying to stomp my head. The response is for me to rock backwards and kick my attacker in their gut or lower body, I assume. I found this ridiculous. It seems to me that these Hanshin Sul weren't really stress tested and were just passed down from teacher to student and so on. I guess my question is, how do you, or how did you, navigate these circumstances when training to become an instructor? Do you speak to your instructor and say in a polite way, hey, that technique is not so great. Can we try something else? Or do you keep quiet and train until you can hopefully make changes in your own program someday? Yes, many of the way that things were taught to me are ways that I have moved on from in my own academy. The big one being one-step sparring. I wouldn't say that one-step sparring is useless, but it's certainly not the most efficient way of learning the techniques inside of the sequence. It's certainly not a good way of preparing to use the skills contained within the sequence. And the particular sequences that we learned, I don't think were aesthetically even pleasing, in that they didn't even look like something that might manifest itself in a self-defense situation. They were convoluted. Things like you would block with a single knife hand, and then while they were holding their hand out, you would turn your hand and then grab underneath it and swing the arm out. You know, stuff that just could never, ever happen. So I think even from a demonstration standpoint, just making a cool looking sequence, they lacked. So yeah, I don't think that you're going to be very persuasive to your instructors. They probably picked that for a reason. You could hint at these sorts of things in conversation and see how they react to them, but tends to be that people are stuck in their ways, typically speaking. Sometimes it's for the best. Sometimes you think you've got something better, and then you try it and you find out it actually doesn't work out very well. So sometimes when you're young, you're arrogant and you discard something that you shouldn't. But assuming you're right about this, yeah, I would personally just hold off until you end up becoming an instructor of your own. And then it would be easy for you to play with your own material. That's a tough one. Yeah, I've been in that situation as well. Just for the record, I think, actually, I would encourage you to listen to the most recent episode of Combat Learning. It's only like 14 minutes long, and in it, Josh Peacock discusses why practical karate, it's often called, has not improved karate. And his argument is that even if you practice the bunkai in a bunkai for the kata that you do, you're sort of ascribing to it a self-defense aesthetic, but that rehearsing that routine isn't really going to give you that much of an edge when it comes to self-defense stuff or fighting in general. And I tend to agree with that. I think that's largely the case. So just be aware of that even if you reworked these routines to have the aesthetic of a real fight, simply rehearsing the routine is not going to give you that much of an additional advantage as rehearsing a routine that is aesthetically less realistic. So hope that helps. All right, from Stay Hey Yeah. Hi, can you give advice on how to do side kicks while being severely overweight? It's difficult to lift the knee and chamber it before kicking it sideways, let alone kicking it high enough. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Oh gosh, maybe I repeated this one from last time. If not, it sounds very similar to the one that I talked about last time. It says it's only from 3 days ago, so that can't be. These are tricky questions. Let me give you one of my favorite analogies. If you are doing a NASCAR race, you can be aware of all of the strategic maneuvering. You could be the greatest NASCAR racer. If you don't like NASCAR, Formula One, whatever. You could be the greatest car driver in the world. But if you enter the race with a golf cart, there is no amount of technical knowledge that can help you win that race. I like that analogy because in the martial arts, our body is our vehicle. Our knowledge of how to execute the techniques, even the reflexes we build, all these things, that's like the driver of the car, right? But you still need to have a physical foundation in order to be able to do the techniques. So if you're saying that because of the condition you're in, you're having a difficult time kicking, often the answer is to get into a different type of condition. If you're interested, I have a course on my site, tkdguide.com. It's free. I'm not selling you anything here. It's free. It's called Supercharge Your Taekwondo, and it has the exercises that have been recommended to me by some world-class people, for Pumse at least, on how to, build the physicality that you need to actually perform these techniques decently. It's difficult to lift the knee and chamber it before kicking it sideways. I can't see what your technique looks like, so I don't know exactly what's getting in your way. But I can tell you, regardless of weight, doing a side kick is difficult. It requires a lot of strength and a lot of flexibility that's not natural to most people. So you have to build that physical foundation. There's no shortcut around it. That would be my advice. Thank you for the question. Next question from Michael, IT83310. Another question for Topic Tuesday. What martial art would you personally study in an ideal world where money wasn't an issue, what's in your area wasn't an issue, etc.? If you could study any martial art on the planet personally, what would you choose and why? That's a tough question. That's a very tough question. Sometimes it depends on the day that you ask me, but I think if I had to just take a stab at it, my personal favorite that I've ever studied, and I only studied it for a short term, but what I really just resonated with it was Uechiru, Okinawan Karate, and I think I would like a variety of the Okinawan Karate systems. I like how classical they are. The one that I studied hadn't been changed in a million years. It was the same as it had been taught to the instructor at the dojo and his instructor and so on. It was very, very ritualized. There's a depth to the kata that I enjoy, and that they're not flashy kata, but the instructor will come up and test your body, so you have to be holding yourself internally in the right way. I really like that for some reason. I like the conditioning element. That's just really cool, and it seems like one of those styles that you can do for a really, really long time, and that you get, if you started young, you might peak in your 60s. You might be at your very highest level in your 50s or 60s because there's not all the high kicks and acrobatic type of movements. And even Aikido has so much falling and rolling and that kind of stuff. It's athletic. You got to be kind of spry to do it well. Whereas, not to say that Okinawan karate isn't athletic, that the athleticism is a subtle athleticism that is something that you can do for a very long time because it's not high impact. So I really like that. I like the timelessness of it. It's just cool. Love myself some Okinawan karate. Now, I find it funny because we have a really good Okinawan karate school right in town here. I ended up at the Taekwondo school, and I think it's for the best. If you're inclined to believe in a God, I think this is what I was supposed to do, because Okinawan karate, while I find it quite delightful, I don't think resonates with very many people, particularly children. Taekwondo resonates with children, and I think I was put here to help the children of my community through Taekwondo. So it's funny that I ended up, in the system that I don't know that I resonate as much with, but I think it's been for the best because so many other people are able to connect to it. And that's not to say I don't like Taekwondo. It's an awesome system. So don't take it that way. All right, another question from Optomix3988. You have probably already covered this before, but maybe you could go over dynamic and static stretching for Taekwondo. When would be the best time to use either for warm-up, cool-down, or competition? Oh, yeah, this is a funny one to me because you're going to hear so many different things on it. What I would encourage you to do again is go to my site, tkdguide.com, and check out that free course I just mentioned on supercharging your Taekwondo, because that has the routine that was taught to me by, again, a world level Pumse athlete. And this particular person is also trained in kinesiology, just a very, very well-educated person on the human body. This is a lot of the stuff they recommended to me. So if you want something from someone who really has like the formal knowledge on it, that's it. Now, who's to say exactly, right? It's funny because my instructors were huge on the stretch kicks, which is a dynamic stretch. You're swinging your leg up. We do hundreds of those in a class sometimes. We'd all line up on the wall, grab the wall or a bar, side stretch kick. We'd each count 10 each leg through the class. There might be 20 people in class, right? Then you do the front stretch. Then I go to a seminar with Bill Superfoot Wallace. If you don't know him, he was a just stellar kickboxer in the 70s and 80s, I believe. And still does seminars, really accomplished martial artist, and he says, don't do those. And he has a lot of static stretches that he teaches. Okay, which is right? I don't know. What does your body feel like it's responding to is what I would ask you. I think we often overthink things that we can intuitively feel. There's an awareness that your body has of what's right and wrong for it that you should really try to tune yourself into, because I think a lot of times that will answer the question for you. For example, a lot of people say, don't do heavy stretching before class. Now, maybe that's true for some people, but for me, a combination of seizing my muscles, loosening my muscles, stretching in a way that is also warming up my muscles, gives me the best performance in a class. heavy stretching. Now, I've heard it said that if you're already flexible, you can warm up with stretching. If you're not, it's maybe not a good idea. So, of course, a lot of people recommend to do the heavy stretching at the end of the class when your body's all warmed up. And they also say that if you stretch heavily and you jump into, explosive movements, you're more likely to injure yourself. I don't know. My wife is like me. She prefers the heavy stretching before class. So what I would say is play around, listen to your body. Your body probably knows what's best more than a study can tell you. Frankly, I don't think this stuff has a ton of intellectual backing. I'm sure that now I'm speaking out of my butt. I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm just guessing. A lot of times there's not a lot to go on with this kind of stuff. And I'm just guessing that might be the case here. Again, there's a lot to intuition because these machines have been around for a long time and they know how to stay alive in a pretty decent way. So that's what I would encourage you to do. From Michael IT8331 again. For next Topic Tuesday, can you discuss how to train in Taekwondo over the long term while avoiding injuries? You mentioned how you damaged your hip and how you can't train like you used to. What do you contribute your injury to, and how can someone train in Taekwondo over many years while avoiding injury? Yeah, good question. So, first of all, my hip injury is largely due to me having hip dysplasia, which basically just means that the hip socket is not big enough for the hip ball, the femur head. So they're too shallow. So I'm prone to cartilage tearing from the types of movements involved in Taekwondo. Now, you won't know that, more than likely, until you hurt yourself. Maybe you can just go and ask to get your hips x-rayed. I don't know. But in my case, I didn't know until it was too late. I already made a career out of it by the time I found out. So a lot of people will kick and be just fine into their golden years. Unfortunately, that was not the case for me. Again, it's about listening to your body. If I could go back in time, one of the things I think I would try to do is just reduce the number of activities I was engaging in. They say your body only has so many break falls in it, and eventually it runs out. I don't know if that's true. But think of someone, so when I was in my 20s and early 30s even, I was doing about 4 hours of Aikido every week. Then I taught probably 3 classes a day, Monday through Thursday, and I did all the stuff with my students. So if I'm showing a form, I'm kicking as high as I possibly can every time. Friday, I had a different instructor help, and I would do their class. And then Saturday morning, I had a class, and I would do that class with everybody. And then I would do strength training and stuff at home. This is a really heavy-duty physical schedule for most people. And that doesn't even include all the cleaning. You know how much cleaning you have to do if you own a dojang and you don't hire it out? You're cleaning constantly if you want to keep the place nice, and that's important. You want to keep a clean school for your students. So, I'm on my feet all the time. If I could go back, I'd probably do less with my students and save some of that wear and tear. Gosh, sometimes these walking on waters, pop, 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 500 of those kicks in a class. Yeah, I'd skip out on those. So I think I'd be more sparing about the amount of training I was doing. But most people are not in the position where they'd be doing the kind of schedule that I had. So that's probably not going to matter to most people. Just, treating your body like you want it to last a really long time. In the same way that you wouldn't take your car and just redline it down the road for miles and miles, right? You want your car to last. Yeah, you might give it some what do they say? Give it the beans. You might give it the beans sometimes, but by and large, you're going to treat it with respect. Do the same thing for your body. Of course, you guys know the commonly said stuff. Warm up before you do the intense exercises, blah, blah, blah. But the big thing is treat your body with respect. From John Stallions, 5313. Thank you for taking the time for these weekly videos. I greatly enjoy them. Here's a question concerning weapons in Taekwondo. I know there are some who believe weapons have no place in traditional Taekwondo and other styles in schools who enjoy incorporating them into their curriculum. I want to know your thoughts on training with traditional weapons or if you use them in your school. If so, what is your favorite weapons choice, and are there particular resources you know of to develop better skills with these traditional weapons? The story goes that, of course, when karate was originally practiced in Okinawa, it was tied very closely with kobudo, the weapons training. And when it was ported over to Japan and became more of a sort of classroom activity, the weapons were removed because, one, you're working more with children. Two, you have limited space and weapons take up a lot more room when you're working in a limited square foot region. So the weapons got dropped, and then, by the time karate migrated to Korea and became Taekwondo, that had largely been left behind. And a lot of the Taekwondo schools will incorporate it into their Hapkido program, or yes, plug it in as an extra. How do I feel about that? I am definitely not opposed to it. Weapons are fun. They're a whole other way of learning coordination. They're a whole other activity you can compete in. They're another way to keep your students interested. So yeah, weapons can be a great way to plug some new content into your curriculum. For me, the Aikido training that I did was very weapons intensive. So we did a lot with the Jo and Boken, short staff and wooden sword, along with some tanto, or dagger knife work. So I know a lot with those things. I know a little bit of the staff that I learned through my Taekwondo training, or I guess it was technically part of the Hapkido class. So that's the extent of my knowledge outside of doing fencing a little bit, which is not something you can really teach in a way that would be valuable for performance. So I teach students the Aikido weapons in the hopes that eventually maybe they'll do some Aikido with me as well, and the Aikido weapons complement the empty-handed part of Aikido quite nicely. I really enjoy the weapons work. Now, it's not good for performance. It's very direct kind of stuff. My personal favorite weapon is the Boken. I feel like training with it really enhances my mind to see angles, to hone into a feeling on how to move correctly, to be efficient in actual sort of combative scenarios. So I really like the Boken. I like the aesthetic. I like the feeling it gives me. I like the mentality it develops in me. That's where I learned my weapons. I don't think I can point you to a particular place if you're interested in weapons outside of saying to go to another system and then bring their weapons into your training. From JV Kanufan, looking forward to your comments on the Kukyuan Pumse videos, Paul. Yes, I have not had a chance to watch those yet. This is the busy time of year. It's go, go, go this time of year. We'll see when I get to those. Looking forward. Regarding downgradings, I see videos, probably Kukyuan again, of fairly senior people doing high downgradings. Are high downgradings less intense or have less sparring? If so, at what point does this occur? Yeah, that's going to depend on the organization, so I can't really speak to that. Right, the next part says, just on your observations of blending Chinese martial arts with Taekwondo, I came to Taekwondo with a bit of Wing Chun experience I can see that the two are quite different, at least on the surface. I'd really like to hear what your thoughts are on what the differences are in your reading of them both. Personally, I think if you bring Taekwondo into close range, the differences begin to reduce greatly. Wing Chun is very much about the bridge, and I think Taekwondo's emphasis on training kicks does suggest a mid-range emphasis for Taekwondo. However, the way we chamber and then block, in my research seems to reference Okinawan karate, I agree, which is advantageous for bridging and limb control. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this. Hope this stimulates a bit of conversational thread. Yes, okay. So I think a big part of what a style is, why we distinguish martial arts, is not so much the techniques taught, but the overall strategy of employing those techniques. For example, Muay Thai and Taekwondo share a lot of similar techniques, but the strategy is very different. Taekwondo is much more movement heavy. Muay Thai is much more planted and more about forward aggression in terms of just attrition, hammering at the legs relentlessly until your opponent crumples, about keeping a tight box and maintaining your balance. So someone kicks you, rather than like a Taekwondo practitioner, if someone's kicking at you, you're going to move out of the way, get them to miss, and then fire a fast counter kick. Muay Thai, you might check that kick and try to throw them off balance with your check and then smash into them, right? So the techniques, a lot of them are very similar. A lot of kicks are the same. We've got elbows in Taekwondo, we've got knees in Taekwondo, we've got the roundhouse kick, right? We've got the front kick or the teep, but the strategy is totally different. So when you're talking about something like Wing Chun, sure, if you, and I'll say it like this, I think the way of the strategy that you would use if you were trying to use pumse from a sort of practical karate playbook would be very different from the fight strategy of Taekwondo. So that the applied pumse strategy is going to be more similar to Wing Chun, and then the differences are much smaller, right? Wing Chun, I've never done it, but I've heard them always just really concentrate on that seizing of the center line, of that very direct, linear approach of cutting into the opponent's center line, of intercepting or cutting them off. And so then the way they stand, the way they posture their mind, right, is totally different from how you would think about fighting as a Taekwondo athlete, where you've got this sort of give and take, you're moving out, make the mistake, or allow your opponent to make the mistake, then you make them pay for their mistake. If you're attacking, you're using this cutting action a lot of times to bridge that gap. Very different sort of thing. If you look at Shotokan karate, to me it reminds me of swordsmanship so much when I train with the bokken. Very similar, weight forward, right, instead of weight back. And there's this idea of moving down the center line, cutting your opponent off with the lead hand strike, or blocking with your weight shifted a little bit back and then exploding in with that reverse counter strike, right? That one-shot destruction type of emphasis. So there's another example. Shotokan and Taekwondo, very similar arts with a totally different strategic mindset on how to employ the techniques. So if I put myself into Shotokan mode, I spar very differently than if I put myself into Taekwondo mode. If I'm in Shotokan mode, it's very similar, again, to training with that bokken. So, it's tricky, right? Like, what is there a one approach that works better than others? Is there a way to fuse all these things together? That's really hard. Aikido has this sort of non-fighting mentality. So you're so often moving in a way that removes you from conflict. So how would you bridge Aikido with Taekwondo? Where does the switch flip over? That's a really challenging thing. some arts bridge better than others, I think. So that's why I guess I said I don't think that a lot of the Chinese arts mix well with Taekwondo, because the strategic mindset on how to employ the striking is so different. It could be an interesting project to try to fuse the two. And I do this sometimes when I'm sparring with people. I'll flip that switch to different styles and see which one actually works well against them, because a lot of times one will fail whereas another works well. So I play with that, just switching on the fly. Obviously, that's a lot harder to do for something like a self-defense situation. But anyway, yeah, I think some just naturally bridge together better than others from the standpoint that if you're dodging and countering with Taekwondo strikes, and then you find yourself in the clinch zone, which happens a lot, then it would be very easy to transition into a judo type of mentality, because you're suddenly in judo range. Whereas the Wing Chun range is a little bit different. You're in that trap range, and while it's not impossible, changing from this long in and out sort of thing to a trapping range just seems less likely in general. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I hope that helps. Some really good questions, guys. Thank you so much, as always, for your participation in Topic Tuesday. Hey, if I haven't heard from you yet, leave a comment for next week. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you, as always, and enjoy your training. Until next time.